Everybody, welcome. You're hanging out here with Ben. This is the Hardcore Punk Project on 92.5 FM in Kamloops. Today, I have Dean Rud from a group called the Fizzgigs. So, welcome to the X, Dean. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Ben. Thanks for having me.
So, the Fizzgigs are a punk band from Calgary. The members are Jay, Scott, Dean right here, and Cody.
That's correct.
And today we're going to talk about their new album, We Are the Fizzgigs, released on March 20th, 2020. First off, you okay with the teen interviewing you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you laughed when you say the title of the album. It's that's what it's all about. And yeah, I mean, I know it's been a tough year, but yeah, this album was kind of about fun first, and so it's nice to see the title bringing a smile to someone's face, just to say it.
Nice. Good, I'm glad, or else this would have been my shortest interview ever. So this is your first released album, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Released any EPs like in the past?
No, not, well, we had a couple. We'd been making this record for quite a while, kind of holed away in the basement, making, chipping away at making the album. And we released 3 of the songs as an EP, but we kind of, we made a couple hundred and pressed them at home kind of thing. So I forget, it's not really an official release. It's just sort of out of the basement sort of thing. But this one is the first official release, the first one to come out on vinyl, first one to come out on a properly manufactured CD and that sort of thing. So it's the first one that feels real for us.
Excellent. Let's talk about your album, shall we? I only get to say that once, right?
That would be awesome.
All right. I think it sounds like 90s punk rock, Screeching Weasel, Blink-182, that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Blink-182 even did a cover of The Girl Next Door.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, that thread that probably dates, back to the Ramones, back to the late 80s in the San Francisco East Bay area, those threads of pop and punk are kind of, that was the spirit, I guess, in which we originally rallied around. This group of musicians have played in groups together, different acts, different sort of subgenres, I guess, but that kind of love of very simple, Ramones core, Screeching Weasel, like you say, that sort of very simple melodic pop punk is kind of what brought us together.
All right. So let's start talking about We Are the Fizzgigs.
All right.
Starting with Calendar Days, what can you tell us about the song?
That's a great question. So all of the songs on the album are written almost entirely by our singer, Jay Sinclair. And this Calendar Days, the lyrics are a story about an adventure that he and his cousin and a friend were on one summer from back in their teenage years. And it's not really, I mean, it's meant to be interpreted openly, but it's a bit of a summertime vibe kind of song. And musically, when the demo came through and it didn't have any lyrics yet, it felt like to the rest of the band, it felt like a song that would be fun to open the record with, just because of the way it starts. And so we kind of had that. It was kind of earmarked as the opening track on the album. from early on in the days of, you know, the days before there was even going to be an album.
All right. And Here I Stay reminds me of a Korn song of the same name.
That's it. I don't think I've heard that song, but I'm cool with that. Yeah. Yeah, Here I Stay is an interesting one. It's lyrically, it's a bit of a darker one. It's about feeling kind of stuck in the situation that you're in. But it's also, and not to put words in Jay's mouth, but it's a little bit about choosing, you know, choosing to work with the situations that you can't necessarily change. And yeah, he's got a more accurate description, obviously, of where it came from originally, as far as the thoughts are concerned. But this one was also part of the earlier one of the songs that he'd written earliest in all of those groups of song, in that entire group of songs. And it felt, again, it sort of set the tone. It felt right as far as one of those, you know, prototypical pop punk, straightforward 3-chord kind of things, and kind of set the tone for us as a band musically. I can tell you, as a bass player, it's fun to play because it has kind of two parts to it. There's a very straightforward, just downstrokes, like I'm playing like Dee Dee Ramone, and then there's another part that it takes a bit more of a walk, which is fun to play. So
Yeah, bass is underappreciated, and that's why when it is played, it sounds great.
you said it, brother.
Punk, gotta love it, right?
That's right. I do love it.
So, do you find it hard to find enough venues to play in Canada?
Yeah, in some respects, it's a challenge to find shows in Canada, and the cities are spread out. A lot of, especially Scott and Jay, spent many years touring actively, like full time, in a band before the Fizzgigs were together. And you know, those drives, and I've done this too with other bands, those drives sometimes are, you know, you'll play a show, you know, somewhere in Saskatchewan, and maybe you don't get a show in Manitoba, and the next show is like 2 days drive away, somewhere in Ontario. So it's tough to find shows sometimes, but I think that's partly why you would see some of those bands dip into the States and spend a lot of time down there. When you're young guys and you're just living together in a van, sometimes that's the easier way to go because the cities are just closer together. But generally, I think it probably works out perfectly. You end up playing the number of shows you're kind of supposed to play. So I like to not sweat it too much.
All right. I don't play in venues. I've only played two. Sun Peaks, that was my largest, and my front yard was the smallest.
Yeah, perfect.
What about in comparison to the States?
I'd say like geography is probably one of the key differences there, and just in terms of population being a bit more dense in a lot of places, and it being easier to get city to city. But yeah, and culturally, I guess a lot of people would probably draw those typical or stereotypical parallels. It sometimes feels like a less friendly audience, but I think that's just on the surface. I think that you find, especially within the punk rock communities, you kind of find like-minded people and end up finding like-minded people regardless of where you go. And similarly, you find people that are not on the same wavelength. But, you know, I've seen that all up and down BC, and, you know, all up and down the west coast of the US. It's in some ways cities are very different, countries are very different, and in some ways, people are just the same.
It's tough being a kid or a teen wanting to go to concerts and shows in Canada. Not enough all ages show. What do you think?
I totally agree with that. I think all ages shows are, I've never really found a good way to describe this, but all ages shows are so important. They were like, I mean, for me, my introduction to not just punk rock, but music being accessible as a thing and in general. Do you find there's a lot of all age? Are there not a lot of all ages shows where you live? No.
Nope. Really, the only places where people go are CJ's nightclub, the Blue Grotto,
Yeah.
or what was that other place called? It's another nightclub. Ah, I'll have to
It'll
find
come
out
to me
later.
later. Yeah. One thing about all ages shows and that kind of I guess it's an attitude that I associated with punk rock, but it's not necessarily just associated with the genre. It's more of just that DIY thing in general. We played shows in people's yards, in people's basements, their living rooms, in pizzerias. Like any place you could basically set up a PA, and any place there was electricity, pretty much we could play a show. And so that's something we found, I think, as kids, and a lot of us as teenagers and young adults, we found we'd have to put on our own shows. And the spirit was always the more the merrier. And of course, making it an all ages show sort of it seemed like it's not like we were going to serve alcohol anyway, but we were kids anyway, so they were all ages shows by default.
I remember back in the 90s when Green Day and Operation Ivy and the Smalls used to come to Kamloops, and it was all ages.
That'd be amazing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it'd be hard. I mean, not only are with the, I guess it's situations different, would be different for any of those bands today. Although the Smalls, if you could get the Smalls to do a reunion tour, that would be amazing. Yeah, I think that whole thing was that movement was almost entirely based around all ages shows. And when they would first come to Calgary and around that area, like early 90s, there were some all ages shows happening. There was a club also called the Westward Club in Calgary that would have bands like that in. So it was kind of whatever the bands could get, whatever they could book at the time. But I think in a lot of cases, the promoters were kids and they were putting on all ages shows. And, they would happen at union halls around here in Calgary. There was a Carpenters Union Hall where they would put on shows, and a community hall called the Multicultural Center. You name it, wherever they could put it on, it would happen.
All right. Now a bit about Destiny.
Ah, yes. This song, again, not to put words in Jay's mouth, but I know this song came pretty naturally for him as far as writing a song is concerned. And he and I are of the same mind in terms of some of our favorite songs are the ones that sort of come out the easiest. And it kind of came out all in one shot. It's called Destiny, but lyrically it's about not really believing in destiny and about making your own path and that sort of thing. So it's a simple one. I think as the album has come out and we've been sort of pushing it out to the world, for a lot of people, this is the first song they hear. It's got a really simple melodic hook, and I think that that's sometimes easy to write off. But I love those songs. I love something with like a nice simple guitar melody. And so for me, when I heard it and heard the demo come through, yeah, it was like an instant favorite. I was excited about it right away.
It's a great song.
Thanks, man.
I did a little recon on you guys. So, how long have you played together as a band?
That's a great question. We first started talking uh, about the idea of a band, Jay and I, um, back in like 2014, I think, but we didn't do anything about it. He had these demos kind of kicking around, like one or two. And then in 2017, we actually um, started uh, getting a bit more serious about the idea, but it didn't. Again, nothing really happened. He submitted a song called Monica in this songwriting contest at a pub in Calgary called the Ship and Anchor. And we got together as a band that is the four of us now, just to play that one song. And that was technically the first official show. So I guess you could say we've been together since 2017. And it's, we didn't have anything else. We had the one song we knew how to play together. And then it took us to, between 2017 and 2020, holy smoke, that's a long time, to, to get the album together, get our ducks in a row and put it out.
So, everything you play is probably in standard or E flat.
That's a great question. We play a full step down. So we play,
DGCFAD.
yeah, you got it. Yeah. Yeah. It's fun to talk music with another musician. It's an interesting thing. And I play in one other band, not very often, but because I play so seldom in that other band, I don't change the tuning on my bass, and I just play the songs transposed on the fretboard, and but having the guitar tuned down that full step allows me sometimes when there's a high D on the bass guitar to drop that low D in there, which sometimes sounds really special. Sometimes it sounds entirely wrong, but sometimes it's really special. So it's nice to pepper that in. The D is a legacy thing. It came from, I think when we were all kids, this is kind of happened. There's a few bands in our local community that kind of were into this. And I think it kind of came from wanting to be able to sing a bit more easily, without having to reach from a range perspective, but also wanting the riffs to sound a bit meaner. And it just kind of stuck with it. Sometimes have you ever played in a low tuning like that before?
I've experimented with other tunings like drop B.
Wow, yeah, way down.
That was
Yeah,
awful Slipknot stuff.
yeah, there you go. Super heavy stuff, right? Do you find the strings start to feel a bit like spaghetti when you're playing like that?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's why I got some Mammoth Slinky strings just in case I do that again.
Yeah, nice heavy gauge. Perfect.
How's the punk scene in Calgary?
That's a great question. It's healthy. I think my relationship with it is different now that I'm an adult with a family and that sort of thing. But when we were kids, it was very centralized. When I say kids, I mean we were teenagers and young adults. It was very centralized in the sense that all the shows happened in kind of one or two places. It was easy to kind of know each other, and there were all the bands kind of played together. Like you'd see, the same sort of dozen bands or so in shows of 4 or 6 of them together, and they would mix and match and move around. And we would party together at people's houses, and that's where a lot of the shows happened. And so it was kind of tight knit, or you sort of knew of most of everyone in the community. And I think these days it's like many things, it's a bit more split up, and the communities have moved in a way kind of online, and the shows, there aren't those sort of staple venues anymore. The shows will happen, like one or two will happen at a venue, and then the neighbors shut it down, and that sort of thing. There are a handful of places that are a bit more institutional, and like this might be the same as in your community, like a venue like the Ship and Anchor, which is a pub. It makes its money being a pub. They've just kind of been a place where if there's a punk band of a certain size coming through town, they're probably going to play there, or they'll play at a place called Dickens, or so that kind of same tighter knit community still exists. It's just shaped a little differently these days. How about in
That's
your?
we don't have much of a punk scene. I mean, you have some of those bands like Bootlicker and Dystopian Youth. I think that's what they were
Yeah,
called, but bands by a guy named Louis J. He's a friend of mine.
yeah,
Um, that's pretty much all we have in the punk scene in Kamloops.
yeah, yeah.
So
How about record stores? Is anyone still running a record store there?
we have two record stores. Barnacle is downtown, and
Yeah.
Sunrise is up the hill.
Oh wow.
Skateboards or scooters?
Oh, skateboards for sure. It's interesting. Scooters were so not cool when I was your age, and now it's like kids are way more open-minded. But yeah, I still have my skateboard, still ride it. I put new wheels on it last year to see if my son would ride it with me, but he's not taken to it. He's well, he's not into either. He's into bikes. How about you?
Use what do I use to get around? Oh right, I use a hoverboard. I
Nice.
don't actually have one, but I wish I had a hoverboard.
Yeah. Yeah, we should
I
be
would
there by
totally
now.
use I would totally use a hoverboard, but I'm scared that I'm gonna run into a wall using it.
I could see that happening for sure.
Now a bit about actually Monica,
Sure.
as you mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, Monica is a very, very silly song. It's kind of like a junior high school love story where, you see, and, you see that person in class and you just, um, you know, you're going steady with someone, but you see that person in class and your heart skips a beat, and this is kind of the new person for you. Again, I'm kind of speaking on behalf of Jay, but this was one of those ones that was just so silly, and it came from a friend of his wife's whose name is Monica Iwanika. So her first name's Monica, her last name's Iwanika, and the story goes that she met this gal and came home and said, Jay, you got to hear this story. This lady, my friend, her name's Monica Iwanika. Isn't that funny? He's like, yeah. And she said, but it gets better. She has a really close friend, and her name is Heather Petter. And basically for Jay, that was like both a joke and a song all in one. So he took the opportunity and wrote up a song about it.
All right. Can any of you play a banjo or a guitanjo?
Oh man, that's a good question. Scott Marshall, our lead guitar player, can play anything with strings. And although I've never seen him play a banjo or a guitanjo, I know he could do it. And Jay, actually, all the other members of the band are super talented musicians. I know Jay's a fearless musician. He can pick up, again, kind of anything with strings. And Cody, our drummer, is a multi-instrumentalist, and he records a lot of bands in his basement. And same thing, pretty fearless. He'll just kind of pick up any instrument he can find. It's really interesting because when I met him, I just knew him as a drummer. But he's been a singer, in bands, been a guitar player, bass player. He doesn't think he can play guitar very well. But as far as rhythmic instruments, especially, I think he's super talented. And I
Kind
just
of,
make, sorry, go ahead.
I can kind of relate to that as give me anything that can be hit by sticks, I'm gonna play it.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I love it. And that's so, I read this book a few years back called This Is Your Brain on Music. And it's kind of like a dive into why music is a uniquely human phenomenon, why it's interesting for us from a biological perspective. So why are we attracted to music, and why does it occur to us as music and not just noise? And I think by that respect, any of us can be a musician, and I love that idea, the way you said it. Give me something I can hit with sticks and I'll make music with it.
Yeah. Um, can anyone play the piano? That's a tough question to ask.
Yeah. I wish I could. Jay can play the piano, and he's got so we recorded a lot of the album, a lot of vocals and guitars in his basement. And if you look at his desk, there's the computer where he does some recording, and then just over to his right are two keyboards. And you would never know it, but he can just he'd be hopping over there, um, tickling the ivories, working out a melody or a harmony. And yeah, he's kind of one of those guys that, and I don't know if you've got friends like this, but they start out with their parents forcing them to take piano lessons, and it just kind of grew for him into this passion for music and experimentation beyond that.
Hey, if you can't play piano, try Simply Piano. You can learn playing piano in just a week. Side note, Simply Piano is not my sponsor, and I don't plan on sponsoring them.
Well, you could. That was a good ad. You should see if they'll sponsor you.
Better than Manscaped, at least. I'm sure you've seen ads for Manscaped.
Oh, I have. I'd rather try Simply Piano though.
I did a bit of headbanging to these next songs, Moving Forward and Living a Lie. Tell us a bit
Yeah.
about those ones.
That's a good intro. And these songs feel that way to me too. They feel a bit heavier, a bit faster. Moving Forward I don't know if by the tempo it's fastest, but as guitar players in the band, we all agree it's kind of one of the harder ones. It feels like it's faster. And when it comes up in the set, when we're playing, it's like, okay, brace yourselves. We're about to hit high gear here. So, and Living a Lie, while not faster, is more aggressive in spirit, and I think maybe comes across that way too, just having that real heavy palm muted guitar part. So yeah, super fun to play, and I can't wait to play them live again.
All right. While I was doing my recon, Dean, I noticed a jazz bass and a precision bass. Which is your go-to?
These days the precision is, but my love for the jazz bass goes pretty deep. That jazz bass I have is a Geddy Lee, made in Japan, but it's a very, it's a great quality guitar that is well built, but didn't cost a lot of money. And I also have this a very deep respect for Geddy Lee and for Rush, so I feel special when I hold that guitar and when I play it. And I don't know if you've ever held one of those Geddy Lee bass guitars, Ben, but the neck is super thin on them.
I've always preferred precision basses because I find them easier to play. But
I think that's true.
And to answer your question, no, I have not held a Geddy Lee signature jazz bass yet.
Yeah. I encourage you to get your hands on one. The neck feels very different. The precision bass has a very special sound though. And the one I play, is what is sometimes called a PJ. So it has the precision bass pickups in the neck, but there's one jazz bass pickup down by the bridge. And so you can kind of blend the tones and get that slightly more, you get the nice round, warm, precision bass characteristics
Yeah.
from the tone, and also a bit of that jazz aggression out of the high end towards the bridge. Anyway, yeah, super love that guitar. I sold a couple of other guitars to get that P bass, and I got it in white because it reminded me of Dee Dee Ramone.
All right. He was a good bass player too. Rick
Yeah,
Dee and all the other Ramones.
yeah, very special kind of place in musical history those guys hold.
I noticed Jay has a Gibson Explorer. That's a pretty rare brand.
Yeah, there's, these Jay and Scott especially really did explore the space. There is an Explorer that's in the mix. I think maybe one that belonged to Scott at one point. I know Jay owned one. Jay's owned a Flying V. But then they've also, like, in our couple of years together, they've also both played Telecasters of different kinds. The favorite guitar, I don't know about from Jay's perspective, but Scott played on the record a guitar called a Gibson RD, which is a pretty unusual guitar. It has a pretty unique shape in terms of the body. It has that kind of middle of the 80s aggressive high gain pickup sound. And it's very rare to see them or to hear them. I did recently learn that most of the rhythm guitar tracks on the Foo Fighters, The Color and the Shape, were recorded with a Gibson RD through, I think, a Mesa Boogie dual rectifier. So amp aside, the RD sounds fantastic, and I think we borrowed it from somebody for the recording, but it was a really special guitar.
All right. Never heard of it before.
Yeah, you should check it out. They're super strange.
All right. Let's chat about these two songs, shall we? Again, gotta keep it short because you said you
Sure.
don't want me to say it long again.
I don't mind.
Uh, almost did it again. Sacrifice Your Love and Moontime.
Yeah. There are two songs on the record that are kind of these thematic, imaginary songs about the end of the world, which one of them is the last song, End of the World, and the other is Sacrifice Your Love. And it's kind of, again, it's just a made up story, but it's about this kind of, yeah, it's a fictitious story of like human sacrifice in order to appease some sort of higher power in the face of the apocalypse. And kind of ridiculous, totally ridiculous lyrically, but it's got a bit of an interesting feel musically. And this was one, again, that came when Scott and Cody and I heard it as a demo. It was like a complete idea. It had it wasn't just a riff, but it was like everything musically was there and the lyrics were all there. And turned out Jay had been working on this one a long time in the background, and yeah, he'd had sort of imagined this scenario. And in the early days of our discussion, we were talking about being kind of like a costume band, like Ghost or something like that, and having these really sort of theatrical kind of end of the world theme things going on. But that's not where our hearts really lied. Our hearts were, and our relationship really was built around punk rock. And so anyway, this came out of that, and yeah, it's still a favorite. And Moontime is kind of lyrically is a bit more serious, and musically is interesting. It comes from it's kind of like originally the rhythm of the bass guitar was inspired by, and I know it's not reminiscent of this, but it's like an old blues riff, and it doesn't sound like that anymore, but that's where the spirit of it came from. And yeah, fun to play, and fun to play as a bass player because you get to be featured a little bit. And the bass part really makes that song for me. So
All right. What do you go with most often, like when you're playing live?
what do you mean by that, Ben?
Like
When
your
go with?
gear in particular.
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, this is something that's changed quite a bit over time. Uh, we used to load up like a van full of gear, full of big gear, and I would bring two 410 bass cabinets and this big, heavy 800-watt amp. And now I just carry one 410. I use a little 500-watt Tech 21 bass amp, and so the gear has all shrunk over time, and my pedal board has shrunk over time too. I just have a tuner, a little compressor, and
Distortion
a
pedal?
distortion pedal. Yeah, and yeah, and one guitar and a pack of strings. And I used to always carry a backup bass as well, but now I just bring one bass and some extra strings and hope the audience is patient enough to wait if one breaks. I know for the guitar players, they do the same. They pack a little bit lighter. Our amps are all smaller now that we're. I think it's mostly because we arrive at a lot of shows separately these days, or we, it's not like everyone go live in a van that's packed full of gear. It's everyone converge on this one spot and play a show, and then we kind of vanish into the night afterwards. So we
Right.
pack light. Yeah.
Time signatures.
I think we generally try to keep things a bit more straightforward, a bit more simple. There's an odd time signature in End of the World, or I think it can be interpreted that way. But generally, things feel, for the most part, like that 4 on the floor, a straightforward 4 count. I came from a band with that was largely creatively drummer led, and he would always write very complex time signatures that, basically rhythmically would be something odd, and you would repeat like an even time signature over it in a guitar part, and they would basically feel like they were going out of time and then falling back in, which was super fun to play and challenging, but also not, like, sometimes as a listener, it doesn't keep your attention. And so again, in that spirit of, late 80s, early 90s punk rock, we like to write short and fast songs and try and just bash them out. So they're usually a bit more simple, even time signatures.
All right. Which female artist, that's a classic twist, would you like to collaborate with?
Oh man, that is a classic twist and a good question. And recently we're working on this project where we're collaborating with other punk rock musicians across Canada. So and there is a female collaborator in there. We were trying to collaborate with more, but there's a lady named Emily Bones from a band called the Anti-Queens, who sings a line in this song. And so I'm really excited about that. She has a fantastic voice and is a great player. But we were also trying to work with Biff Naked. We were trying to see if she would collaborate on this song as well, and couldn't get a hold of her. So Biff, if you're out there, I don't know, one day would be great. There are so many. I mean, I believe very strongly in community through music, and so I mean, there are so many musicians in general I'd love to collaborate with.
All right. Biff Naked is a good choice. If I could collaborate with any female artist, my top three would be Nita Strauss,
Oh,
Tarja Turunen from Nightwish, or
wow.
formerly of Nightwish, and Alyssa White Gloves from Arch Enemy.
Nice.
That stuff way heavier than you.
Yeah, you've got a special metal project in mind. I like it.
Yeah, I listen to I listen to punk and then I listen to death metal and all our related genres.
I love it.
Uh well, I asked you guys some strange questions in the interview, which let me hear. First, this is a classic question that I've asked all the artists I've interviewed. Hell
Okay.
yeah, Broken Love, Fear Run, Brother Leeds, Surface of the Sun, Tales of the Tomb, and now you.
I can't wait.
Will you accept a challenge from me?
I do. Well, I think I accept. Let's go for it.
Can you record a music video of you playing a country song that you wrote? What does it say? About a sweet skateboard falling in love with a spicy scooter in the fall.
Wow. I accept this challenge. It's not necessarily going to be good, Ben, but I'm going to write it down just so I don't forget. And do you mind? So it's a sweet skateboard. Sorry, I'm just getting some notes together. Country song that I wrote
Yes.
about
About a sweet skateboard falling in love with a spicy scooter in the fall.
Oh, I love it.
I always try to make my challenges funny.
Falling in love with a spicy scooter in the
In the
fall.
fall. Yes. I have challenged every band, and Fear Run is the only one to have actually done the challenge.
Well, this sounds like a unique challenge, and yeah, I'm up for it. What do I just email it to you when I'm done?
Yeah, just
Okay.
contact me and tell me that you've done it.
Okay,
All right.
it's gonna be awful, but I'm looking forward to doing it.
It'll be fine.
Thank you.
All right, final question. Can you tell us a bit about Frank Mills and the End of the World?
Yeah, absolutely. So Frank Mills is an interesting one. It's a cover song. It's originally from a musical called Hair, but the first time any of us in the band heard it was when it was being covered by a band in the 90s called the Lemonheads. And they did just this acoustic, very Lemonheadsy kind of cover, which was cool. And it has a very unique melodic progression. And I think that's what's attractive about it. And we were at a practice one day and Jay said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we covered this tune and played the Lemonheads version? We were like, yeah, that would be awesome. Up the tempo a little bit, make it feel a bit like our own. And soon enough, we were doing it. And then when I wasn't until I went to clear the license to record the cover version of it that I actually discovered it was from the musical Hair. I'd never seen that before. So anyway, that's the story of it. The End of the World, I mentioned a little bit before. So this is kind of from that apocalypse daydream that Jay was having. And so it's about something kind of dark and serious and strangely applicable to us in 2020 here. But it's meant to be lighthearted. There's a lyric that says, leave your microwaves behind. You won't need them now. We'll be dead in the ground kind of thing. So it's, again, something about like taking a dark topic and making light of it. And so it's kind of, we typically end shows with it, and it felt, again, very naturally like a way to end the album. It's got that kind of shuffly sort of slower tempo, and it just felt like a nice way to wrap things up, and still super fun to play. It's got a nice big vocal harmony in it that's fun to sing, and it reminds me a bit of 50s doo-wop in a way. So yeah, it's different, but fun.
Yeah. Well, guys, it's been fun. I would like to thank you all for being here with me today. Yes, I
Thank
know I'm
you.
saying that even though there's only one of you.
Well, I'm still very glad to have been here. Thank you.
Punk is power. Happy headbanging to you all.
And to you as well. Thanks so much, Ben.
You're welcome. And